Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting firm Riderflex. If you enjoyed today's guest interview, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the Riderflex podcast. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
John Cooper on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, John?
I am swell. How about you, sir?
I'm doing fine. You in Broomfield or in Colorado today? Whereabouts?
I'm actually in Broomfield, Colorado today, amazingly enough.
Okay. Now, is that where I know you went to high school there. Did you grow up in Colorado as well?
I grew up in Colorado, lived a little bit of time in California, came back to Colorado. I didn't think I would ever actually end up back in Broomfield, but when you're married and you have kids, you kind of look for, hey, where's the great cul-de-sac that my kids can go play at the neighbors' houses? And, you kind of give them that amazing experience. And so we ended up moving from Denver to Broomfield, actually the week that they did shutdown for COVID. So
really?
Amazing timing on our part, which was great compared to where we were living. But we love it up here. It's been wonderful.
So your parents, were you a native then, born here?
I was born in Boulder. Mm-hmm.
Born in Boulder. Okay. And your folks, are they still in Colorado? Are they still around?
Yeah, they amazingly, they are now back in Broomfield. And I have a sister that's back in Broomfield. And I probably have about 60 family members in the area.
Wow. The Coopers. Everybody's like, yeah, the Coopers.
I still have a set of grandparents alive, the Giordanos.
Wow.
And, tons of aunts and uncles and cousins and nieces and nephews and everything you can imagine across the board, all over the place. It's a great place to live because it's if you think about it as it takes a village, man, I've got a village.
Yeah, right. What'd your folks do? What'd your mom and dad do?
So they are right now they have an events business. They actually, growing up, was they had a cleaning and restoration business, and so I actually, from a very young age, went and worked in that business with them. Like carpet cleaning and restoration, like flood jobs, and
I see
type of things. And so, even at the age of 11, I went and got certified on carpet cleaning, right? Which was very fun. But I did that through high school and college. They ended up selling that, and they now throw the largest trade shows for the cleaning and restoration industry. And they also do quite a bit on kind of energy and spiritual side of things as well. And so there's a big practice, big focus on that.
Okay. So the entrepreneurial bug was there early on, right? It sounds to me like.
Well, funny enough, coming out of college, my dad looked at me and he actually said, there's absolutely no way you can even work for a big company, right? Like you don't even have it in you. It's not even in your genetics, right? So, it's 100%. It's always been a part of me. I actually spent a little bit of time working for big companies, mostly because I didn't understand the mindset of how a big company worked. It was very foreign to me, right? And so I made the decision at a younger age, right, coming out of college, that would be the right time to go work for a big company, because I knew I needed to be able to interact with big companies. And if I didn't understand the mentality, how it functioned, how did this organization work? How did it think about its people? How did it make decisions? It would be very difficult for me to ever work with it and do business with a large company. So all of that was, necessary training, I would call it.
Right. Well, your major was political science, though. What was the original plan? Or you were just like, whatever. I'll just major in whatever.
I think I was always interested in politics. I wasn't sure if I was, potentially going to do a lawyer, and quickly decided it's not a logical place to go.
I got you.
The part about political science, which is interesting, is that what it really teaches you how to do is think, right? And think strategically. And you're surprised by the number of CEOs I meet who actually have political science backgrounds.
Interesting.
Right?
All right.
A lot of it has to do with, your ability to strategically think, the way that you can position, a company, how to, all the different things that you actually see in politics are sometimes useful as it translates to being a leader of a company.
And what kind of kid were you in high school and college? I mean, were you straight A's? Were you a little bit of a rebel? Did you get in any trouble? Like, where were you in the mix there?
Oh, I was the straight A kid.
Oh, were you?
I was also the super ambitious president of anything I could touch, type of kid who over excelled at everything. I was that kid.
I got you. All right. So
very much, but it was still not quite satisfied with what I was doing, I guess you could say. Right. And can I go on a side tangent? Is it early enough to go on a side tangent?
Go for it.
Side tangents. So one of the things I found that was I only recently learned about myself was that I was dyslexic. Right.
Really?
Oh yeah. And I have so many vivid memories, even from high school, of seeing things. I'd be in this AP class or honors class or whatever it is, and I would have an answer that was over here. All the other smart kids were over here. I knew what I was doing. This was the only way that made sense to me, but yet everyone else was over here, right? And I think growing up, if you're dyslexic, especially if you don't know you're dyslexic, right? You think that maybe there's something wrong, right? Versus understanding potentially that's a kind of a superhero strength for being able to visualize things and see what that is. And interestingly, people like Richard Branson and folks have started coming out and really talking about the advantage of hiring dyslexic people because just that ability to visualize things. And even reading to my daughter the other day, who's a 7-year-old, and it was going through kids with different challenges and asking them, hey, tell me about yourself, and what is I should know. One of the kids was dyslexic, and it was interesting because the way that they captured this kid seeing things kind of like right here, and then their way they're translating it and putting on paper, almost brought a tear to my eye, because I was like, man, that is actually me. That finally there was something that actually captures the way that I show up in the world.
Wow.
Okay. So
I had to make you feel good. You had to feel good about that, right? You're like, man, okay,
yeah, it was really neat. And so it's interesting as I then approach any company or I think about anything, right? I actually lean more and more on that than anything else, right? Just because it helps me, I have an interesting way that I can visualize where a company is now, where it can go, what it can turn into, all of these type of opportunities, because you're just such a visual learner.
Very good. Interesting. Okay. So good kid though, all the way through college as well. Never gotten into any much trouble. When did you meet your wife?
So I met my wife in 2013.
Oh man, you were single for a long time after school, because you graduated in 98.
The second wife.
Whoa. Let's go back then. Okay, when did you get married the first time? Not that your current wife wants us to talk at length about your first wife, but
2008, I believe, or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. And how long were you married the first time?
About 4.5 years.
Any kids from that marriage?
2 kids. And I, for me, it was really important. I spent so much of my life focused on just trying to learn me from a business perspective. I hadn't really spent much time thinking about me from a relationship perspective. Right. And so, part of the way I kind of approached the relationship world was, maybe I should try to find people who are the opposite of me. And you think of it almost like a balancing equation. Right.
Okay.
And what I found was that doesn't quite work. Right. Because, if you're over here and she's over here, let's talk about it, right? You have less commonality.
Yes.
Right? Or as I like to tell people, Paula Abdul is full of it, right? You may have a short-term attraction, a long-term attraction is like, it becomes challenging when you don't have a lot of common overlap, right? And so, going through my divorce, I became very, very cognizant of who is it I should probably be within this world, all the way to the point of knowing the exact career I think I should find in a partner. I needed someone who did left brain and right brain, right? Because I knew how smart she needed to be. I knew all of these amazing things, right? And I set the bar so high, right, of who this person needed to be, that was going to come in my world. I actually thought it was going to be years and years being single, right? Honestly, it was what it is. But I mean, I'm not sure if you know the concept of manifest, right? In many ways, I came up with I put it out into the universe.
You created her. You created her.
I take full credit, honestly. So I jumped on eHarmony, right?
Okay. All right. You put in all these specs.
Well, and you can't even, some of the specs you can't even put in, right?
Yeah.
Literally, the first person that eHarmony hook sent to me, first person, I read through the second paragraph and I was like, oh man, that's gonna be my wife.
Wow.
And, right? 4 months later, we were already talking about marriage. I mean, it was that obvious that we were meant to be together.
That's pretty cool. And they got married in 2013, you said. So
we got married in 2014, met her in 2013, and we have two kids together, and we have being blended family where the siblings don't think of each other as half siblings. They all just think of brother and sister. That's very good.
Does she have kids from her first marriage too?
She was never married before.
Okay.
So I was first. And
so 4 together. Basically, you have 4.
Yes, I would say definitely. Basically, I have 4.
Very good. I live in Broomfield. It's interesting that, it does matter. I mean, religion, politics, activities, hobbies, clean versus messy, hyper versus calm. I mean, you could go on and on and on about all of these things about somebody, but it does matter. I mean, if everything is opposite, like what are you going to talk about? All you're going to do is argue.
And there's some aspects of some, getting similar levels of IQ, EQ.
Yeah, that too.
Right? All of those things really matter.
They do.
I needed the combination of left brain and right brain.
Yeah.
Right. I needed a person that was able to embrace and was looking to further embrace the creative side of their mind.
Yep.
Right. Because there was such an aspect of that, but yet could still be analytical. Right. And so, I think if you find those type of relationships, it's way easier to see each other and recognize each other and be able to support each other in those relationships. Agreed. So as you can tell, I'm delighted by my marriage. I'm delighted by my wife. I'm delighted by my family. I'm very, very fortunate with all of that.
Yeah, we'll wrap this particular segment up here by telling listeners, hey, listen, if you're young, let's say you're in your 20s, even early 30s, whatever, the infatuation, physical bedroom stuff. I mean, that's cool, but it's so much more than that. It is getting married to somebody is so much more than that. Like, really, please just make sure some of this other stuff is in line. Couldn't agree more.
More. I mean, oftentimes, if you look at it, is it a person that's giving you energy and helping you grow and allowing you the space to make mistakes and grow, right? Or is it a person that's kind of sucking from you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a big difference. And you live this one life. You might as well have an amazing life. And I think all of us are here to grow and transform and be on our journeys. And that journey is just way easier if you have someone that's supporting you.
Yep. Totally agree. So some of these, the divorce and the getting remarried and things, some of this timed in with you starting companies, selling companies. I mean, man, you had, I'm watching your timeline here. I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile and you're telling me about your relationships. I'm like, oh man, some of this stuff is hitting on the same timeline.
I might as well mix up everything at the same time, right?
Yeah. I mean, didn't you start your first, let's see, walk us through your career a little bit. You don't have to touch on every single thing, but your most successful stuff, your exit, and maybe some of how it ties into some of your relationships as well.
Yeah. I mean, early career, like I said, was big company stuff. And probably the greatest education I got was when I was accepted on the global strategy team at Level 3 Communications. which was for me just an amazing background of people who had learned at Mackenzie and Bain and gone to good schools, and it was kind of a fast acceleration into the world. And I was able to, I think they were really good at understanding my brain worked a little bit different and putting me on kind of more advanced type of scenarios and projects to look at.
Cool.
From there, I think the entrepreneurial bug really kicked off a little bit. And where I started really finding myself, I was probably 27, 28, long story. I ended up presenting to the guy that was the chief science officer of a company called SAIC, which was one of the largest defense contractors. And the gentleman who was there was a guy by the name of Dr. Adam Drobot. And Dr. Drobot, one of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet. And the people I was working with at the time were asking me to go in and present a bunch of stuff. And finally, I just presented the thing I was interested in, which was laser projectors at the time, and the ability to even start getting into 3D type of images without having to wear glasses. And he got really excited about it, right? And he and I started bonding over that, and he became somewhat of a technology and business mentor for me.
Okay.
He moved over then to Telcordia, which was kind of the biggest part of what was Bell Labs back in the day.
I see.
Thousands of patents. And he said, maybe you should commercialize some of this stuff for us. Right. And I hadn't really thought about that before. It was not even something that from my background or growing up, I'd ever even thought of. Right. I was like, this is great. Got a commercialization agreement, all this stuff. And I'm like, wonder how you start a company. Right. I haven't learned any of this stuff yet. And so honestly, the next, I would say 8 years to a decade of my life was spent, co-founding companies and learning all the lessons and screwing up everything I could screw up and, just doing all this stuff. But, oftentimes what I found was the greatest lesson was, the way I've learned corporate law and securities law and IP law and all this stuff is I just get in there I just get into the background with all the attorneys and I ask the questions. Why is it like this? Why does it work this way? Right? Because if you know the why behind something, the spirit of it, then you really understand everything as a tool. Right.
Yeah, right.
And how that works. And so I learned all that. I got into the financial side of things and how do you really build pro formas and how does the financial aspect and reporting really work within a company. And, I really developed the philosophy that no one should have the right to run a company unless you know your numbers.
Isn't it true? Yeah. You know your numbers, make sure the operating agreement, the legal stuff, the patents, the protected, any of the legal, all of that, the insurance,
Right.
those are all the back end things that some people just leave. They just leave it on the table way too long. They get an idea going, they get some revenue going. They don't have they don't have the proper paperwork in order, their organization set up, and then bam, they hit a hurdle, and then it gets messy really fast.
Well, the businesses are complicated because there's just a lot you have to know, right? Before you even into the business that you're doing. And so I had a lot of, very fortunate opportunities to, like I said, get in there and learn those mistakes and do these things. But the other part, I started having to spend some time learning is, how do you show up in a workplace, right? Are you more a leader, a manager? Like, how do you interact with the various people above you or below you? And gaining a lot of confidence. And, sometimes I would say, I always want to be the best I can in everything. And, one of the hardest lessons growing up is you can't be the best in everything, right? In fact, there's going to be a bunch of stuff you are really not good at, right? And you should celebrate that and understand that, right? Is one of the things that happens. And, for me, part of what I really started learning about myself was I was really, I thrived in anything that was visionary.
Okay.
Right? I thrived in anything that took that vision and translated it to a story that essentially I was then selling or basically getting people on board, right? Whether that be investors or people that we're selling to or even internal employees. But man, when it came to the management aspect, especially of people, and here's what you should be doing, and here's how I'm going to record your metrics on stuff and all these things.
Right. Yeah.
Know how to do it, but it drives me insane. It breaks my brain every time I have to do it. And so there was a piece of me that had to admit, like, I tell people, I go, look, I'm the worst micromanager of all time because I don't know how to do it. I literally have no concept of any of these things. My philosophy now is I hire people who, need to be great managers for the teams that are around them. Right. And I give them the space. And in many ways, the way I think about it is I kind of work for them. What do you need to be, or what do you need to do or what do you need me to do for you so that you're successful?
Right. Yeah. Great. Awesome.
Right. And so that's just my philosophy. And I don't try to get into the stuff that breaks my brain where I have value.
You're big. You've done so many things. I mean, if people look you up on LinkedIn, they're going to see, all kinds of stuff. But your big first exit was Ebu. Is that right?
Right. So that was an interesting one. I didn't really intend to get into the cannabis space early on. Okay. And I was encouraged by a lot of people to look at it after legalization happened in Colorado.
Did you, had you had an exit before that where you had a little nest egg of money or no?
Yeah. I mean, nothing.
Little bit. Okay.
Right home about, right?
Okay.
With this one, and it's funny, my relationship as I think about money is probably a lot different than other people's. Okay. Which is, if I'm on the path of what I'm supposed to be doing in this world, the money shows up. When I get off my pathway, then stuff just doesn't flow anymore. Right. And so I always know if I'm on my pathway or not on my pathway based on, what's happening from a financial perspective.
I love that.
The Ebu part, was interesting because the part I started getting really curious about was if this industry was to ever go mainstream, the biggest challenge was inconsistency in the product. Right. Right. Like sometimes you feel this way, sometimes you feel this way, yes. Sometimes you feel this way. Right. Yes. And, I was like, man, if mass consumer adoption is ever to happen, they want to make sure that if I want to feel chill, give me my chill product. Right. If I want to feel happy, give me my euphoric product. Or if I want to feel this. Right. And so that started leading down a path that was really interesting. Could we figure out how to produce reproducible experiences or feelings in a way that almost everyone would experience it every single time? And this led us down fascinating science, right? Part of the stuff that my brain really starts to love, which was, we were getting into a world of like polypharmacology. Never done polypharmacology before, right? But it was really a study of how multiple compounds interacting at the same receptor site create dramatically different experiences, right? So the easy way to think about it is, you don't have a Reese's peanut butter cup receptor on your tongue, right? You have chocolate tastes like chocolate, peanut butter tastes like peanut butter, comes together, boom, you got Reese's peanut butter cup, right?
That's right, yeah.
And so the part that people don't know is that if you look at serotonin receptors, your dopamine receptors, your cannabinoid receptors, they're all built from the same type of receptor, right? They actually collect lots of different compounds. And depending on that combination of compounds, you can actually change the experience or the result a person's going to have exponentially.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So our world of pharmacology today is, the headache, you take ibuprofen, right? One fixes everything.
Yep.
That's a government political thing. It has nothing to do actually with how our bodies work, right? It's just what we can do from a safety study that we can then commercialize, right? And so we started finding that when we started creating these different combinations, right? What was amazing is that in double-blind studies, and we were doing high throughput screening, we were going live human receptors and testing these things and studying them and doing all this stuff to help us figure this out. But in double-blind studies, it didn't matter if a person was young or old, black or white, male, female, heavy user, light user, whatever it is. Almost everybody in a double-blind study, we can make them feel a certain way.
I see.
Right? Which was amazing results, right?
Yeah.
We got into a lot of the genetic side. We then started taking that and saying, what if we could make better pain medicine? What if we could make better anxiety medicine? What if we could do all of these different things? And so, really led us down the path. And the exit for us went back to originally the concept that a big commercialization, right? So 2017, 2018, big companies started looking at getting into the cannabis space, right? Well, if you sit on the board of directors in one of these companies, right? What you sit there and go, liability. right? And there wasn't a lot of companies out there that could walk into the board of directors and go, hey, we've done all the studies. We actually know what it does. In fact, the products we're making, we'll tell you every single ingredient. We'll tell you what it does. We'll tell you the performance results on everything so that you can feel very comfortable with the product that you're producing and putting in the marketplace is not going to have adverse, type of results, right?
Wow. Okay.
And so you name it across the board. Even though I'm probably out of NDA, I can't mention it, but imagine the biggest soft drink companies, beer companies, other drink companies, other product companies. We're all coming to my doorstep again and again and again, right?
And they're saying, we need this technology. We need this scientific process technology.
A lot of it was, it started more with the conversation of, we were told that you're the person we should talk to understand what this is, right? We created a reputation of being one of the top scientific companies. And so we'd sit down and I wasn't even doing a hard sell. I was just basically saying, why don't I just teach you this first? Why don't I get you comfortable with this first? Right. And then you can understand what the opportunity is. And, we went through a lot of amazing journeys with various big companies that actually got into the space.
By the time the big companies are knocking on your door, did you have a bunch of stuff protected and patented and trademarked and all?
She filed over 50 different patents, probably over 5,000 different claims associated with things. We built a big IP wall. If you want to get deep into IP strategy, we can, but we actually purposely didn't go through full prosecution and actually have final patents on things. We had always been granted novelty, but we were able to build really big walls and didn't have to narrow the walls yet by selecting certain data sets over periods of time, right?
How did you fund all this, John, with the scientists? Because you had to have these scientists and these super smart people and these analysts, and then you had to pay all these lawyers to do all this shit. How'd you fund all this?
A lot of begging, borrowing, stealing, normal. No, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, you couldn't really do institutional capital with what we were doing. And in fact, early on, it was super hard because originally we were actually a cannabis company. Eventually we gave up that license because it was way easier without it.
I see.
But the investors that were getting in had to be so passionate about what we were talking about and doing, they would have to go to their police station and get fingerprinted and submit applications to the Marijuana Enforcement Division in order to be considered for investing in this company, right? It was very painful at the time it was done. But with everything I've found when it comes to investments, 99% of people who invest are human, right? They make emotional decisions and they support it with facts. Right. So if you think about investors from that perspective and you figure out what is it that, is going to get them emotionally excited about what you're doing and then be ready to support it with the facts and the data. So, they don't say no. Right. You're going to be in a really good place to potentially close a lot of investors into things that are very, even very challenging sometimes, as long as there's that emotional hook. Right. And
that's a good point. That's a great tip, John. Great tip.
It's important to think about it. And, what I find with a lot of, early companies and scientific companies and everything is that they're just too complicated in the story that they're telling oftentimes. Right. And, most of the time when I'm telling people going through fundraising, I go, look, investors, you remember 5 points. Right? You just threw 57 at me, right? You better hope. How do you know it's the right 5 points I'm remembering when I walk away from this conversation? Right?
I mean, a lot of your time at Ibu must have been spent raising cash. Had to be. I mean, damn, you must have.
It was a lot. I mean, we brought in, by the time we were done, $17-18 million into a company that had no revenue, and then exited for, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
No revenue. You hadn't actually sold.
Well, we had. No, here's the crazy part. This is sometimes I question myself. We actually have revenue. We have products, but as a part of hey, I'm going to commit to the strategy that we are a scientific company that's really designed for the large mass scale commercialization. It didn't make sense for me to sell products anymore on the small market.
Okay.
Right. And push down that stream. So we killed all our products.
Killed the products. So what you ended up selling was the IP, basically.
That was it. The IP and the team. and all the data stuff.
And the team. Okay. Did you have to do a ride along with that, by the way, or they were like you were there, or you were out as soon as the sale happened?
I did. I committed I would come on board for a year. And they had me had nothing to do with anything I'd ever done before. I actually helped set up the US for them. We kind of went from 0 people, 500 people in 6 or 7 months. I mean, it was, fast scale, everything moves very quickly, type of thing, which was also very fun. I think for me though, I know me, I'm not, building large scale companies to do those type of things aren't the things that drive me. Right.
Okay. And you sold, I mean, this is public knowledge. I think you sold the Canopy Growth Corporation, right?
Right. Correct.
Yep. Great. Hey,
group of people.
What was that?
They were a wonderful group of people.
Yeah. Congratulations. What a major win for you. So could you have retired right there? Were you like, okay, I'm done. I'm retired, and you're like, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to sit on some boards. What was the plan for John then?
Yeah, if your question was, could I have financially done that? Sure, but I had no interest in that, right? Because I don't work for money, right? And, coming out of that, I really liked what I was doing at Ebu, but I didn't love it, right? And part of what I wanted to figure out was in my lifetime, now that I can afford the opportunity to contribute to the world in a more significant way.
Oh, all right.
Find the pathway of where I wanted to be able to go in this life. And especially with 4 kids, like what's the world I want to leave them? I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And, for me, the part that excited me was looking at, a very high level, how do we save the planet? Okay. But if we kind of dig one layer deeper, the biggest issue that we have more than anything is just how we produce power. Right, is the biggest thing, right? That's why we're getting most of the carbon in the air, and all the stuff that's creating all the major problems that we're seeing today. But also, we're running into major economic problems with the production of power and the way that we're looking at translating the global economy as we move forward. And in looking at every way that we were producing power today, I looked at and went, man, this whole thing seems like it needs to be revolutionized, right? We need this. We're doing the same thing that we've been doing for a really long period of time, and there's hardly been any innovation in this, right? Mm-hmm. My sweet spot in the world that I started figuring out about myself is I'm really good connection between the beautiful minds who can create stuff. I call them the artist scientists, right? The ones who really imagine the world way different, right? And then, try to figure it out, and the rest of the planet, because typically that person struggles to communicate with the rest of the planet.
Yeah, right? You're right.
Building real commercial enterprise about it. So
especially if they're trying to communicate to investors that have cash.
Investors who have cash, or or just even you're talking to partners, or you're just trying to communicate out to the general public or anyone like this, right? It's all really important to make sure that you can explain what this is. But also going back to that scientist and going, I know you think you have a lot of really good ideas for how you're going to bring this to the marketplace, but why don't I help guide this for you in terms of where it goes and what you can do with this, right? And so,
was there a particular energy channel or path you were going down? How did you?
Yeah, I spent a long time futzing around on a bunch of stuff because I didn't know much, right? I mean, oftentimes I'm a very much hands-on. I got to get out there and try a bunch of things and kind of fail at a bunch of stuff before it really starts lining up. And similar to what we talked about earlier, when things start lining up, the universe almost starts pushing me in a certain way, and a lot start happening. That's when I know that I'm on the right path with things, right? Okay. And that only really started happening for me earlier this year, where I, for the first time, sat down and found a group that I thought was doing some really wild, innovative type of stuff. The CTO there was one of the lead hydrogen motor scientists for NASA. It created a whole bunch of stuff as it relates to the energy side of the world. There was, the other partner there had actually created one of the top control panel businesses in the Southeast for the US. And they were working on this new high efficiency DC generator that actually really presented some interesting options for how the world moved forward. And I say that is, when we think about power creation today, we think about big power stations, and then we think about transmission, right? And part of what no one's talking about right now is that that model no longer works, not just because of what we're trying to burn to do this, but the cost of transmission is becoming cost prohibitive. And it's causing all of these problems. And our power demand globally is going up something like 6 to 8% a year, right? We can't afford to keep building transmission the way that we've been building transmission before. And so all of a sudden you got to start thinking about shifting towards microgrids, power creation closer to where you need to use it. And what most people don't realize is most things that take power use DC power, not AC, right?
You're
so
right.
We lose 67% of our power when we create it, turn it to AC, shift it, shoot it across the freaking wires to wherever the heck it needs to go, convert it to DC to be able to use it, right? Versus what if you had a DC generator that's 98% efficient, just produces DC, plugs it right into the actual thing it needs to use.
Anything, plug it in, anything, plug into it. Okay. All right.
Into it. So you actually create these prime mover type situations. And so that started looking like it was a really good commercial opportunity. And we're actually building out kind of our first scale factory for bringing some of that to the marketplace. And
now, when you met these guys, you're talking about were they originally meeting with you because they're looking for an investment and they knew you were an investor?
Long story. We're not even getting into why they met me. Long story. But let's just say we were very similar at the very beginning.
All right. What's the name of the company? Can you pitch the company?
It's called Virien, Virien.
Okay.
Which was kind of a combination. When I came up with the name was viridis, which in I believe Latin or Greek was green. I should know that. Okay. And then I basically shortened it, took the beginning part of energy, combined it together, and voila, Virien.com was available. And
were you the lead investor?
Partly, but also kind of co-founder, creator. I came in initially as CEO on that one.
Okay.
We're actually looking quite a bit on wind. So, if we look at the wind energy market, right? What most people aren't talking about is the big fan blades that are out there.
Right.
Be recycled, or they have to come down and get replaced. And you can't even recycle these things because there's a whole bunch of rare earth minerals and all this other stuff that are toxic.
You can't recycle those. So what are we going to do with them? Just pile them up in the desert?
Right. Like up in Oregon, there's a massive wind farm where they got to stick 10,000 of these things in the ground right now. Super expensive. Who wants to even take these things and stick them in the ground? Right. It's a horrible model. Right.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah. Vertical wind turbines, which are almost just as efficient. But with our generator in place, and we just did a licensing deal to, so if you have a normal generator, you have a stator and a rotor, right? And so it kind of just does this. And we actually have technology that allows us to do this.
Okay. So
wind turbine that goes one way and goes this way, we can make something that's about 60% more energy efficient by actually creating something where we're just capturing the energy this way on these vertical wind turbines. And so we'll have that out in the marketplace here in the next couple months in terms of early trials and a lot of great stuff. There's some.
So you're in R&D mode right now and in production mode or.
It's early commercial. We're starting to get some real units that are starting to work, which was great. And then we actually just did a deal this morning where we just took over technology that can use water and combustion engines. Super exciting. I'm not going to go much into that one, but man, like I've seen this thing run multiple different engines and it works great. And the way it works is really fascinating, super advanced stuff I'm not going to talk about at this point, but we're really excited about that deal. But what's happened only in the last few weeks is there was a different kind of sister company that came along that made sense for me to do a little bit of a pivot over to.
Okay.
So I stayed as chairman as Virien and very active in what's happening there. But just jumped on board with we created a new company in order to move forward with this called Symius. And partly what was really interesting in terms of what can help save the planet and everything is kind of the materials that we use to produce things. And we've kind of maxed out what we can do with plastics and the recyclability of plastics and the performance of plastics. And the world started coming up with these new 2D structures, like things like graphene or boron nitride and some of these other ones that are really interesting at very small levels, where, graphene is potentially one of the strongest, if not the strongest material known to man. It's 1,000 times more conductive than copper. You read all these things, everyone's so excited about graphene, but you can't take a 2D structure and really build stuff with it, right? But so everyone's like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could take graphene, stick it into polymers? And so a lot of people have been trying to scale up graphene, stick it into polymers to get about 20% improvement. Well, there's a scientist that actually was one of the top plastic scientists in the country. And he's like, man, I think they're all making it the wrong way. And he came up with a whole extrusion process where he's able to kick out large volumes of graphene polymers, whatever polymer that you want to, making metric tons of this stuff at almost, very, very low cost. But we're seeing somewhere between 200 to 600% improvements in the strengths of these plastics. And the part that then got me really excited about this is one of the other ways that you can really change the entire energy economy is through power storage, right? And so one of the biggest issues that we have for balancing the grid, for storing power at the house and everything, right, is power storage, because where we're running into problems are peaks, right, in the creation of power. And so if you just had a steady stream, right, to the homes, to the businesses, or whatever it is, and you can build up power storage, and during the peak times, you're draining the batteries, and during the low times, you're filling up the batteries. Incredible way of actually helping the grid. But also, if you look at most things that we're trying to shift to, electric vehicles and potentially electric planes and all of these other things, all takes power, right? All takes power storage, right?
Yes.
So early evidence using this type of the graphene polymers and then doing a conversion process is that, there's a really good chance we're going to be able to introduce batteries into the marketplace in, 3 to 5 years that will be able to, it's funny I use those numbers, increase the energy density of batteries 3 to 5x, increase the cycles of the batteries 3 times more, be able to be fully recyclable batteries, which is obviously extremely important as we're moving forward, and be completely safe. You can shoot the thing with a bullet, plug it in, and the thing will still work, right? And so if we really think about the whole way that we store power, we use power, we accelerate power, right? I have one hat on that's thinking about what is power creation, right? Using anywhere between, wind and DC power generation and potentially water and a whole bunch of novel concepts. And then the other side is, what are the materials that we build the world with? This new kind of alien material. But then how can we use that to do things like power storage, right? And so for me, this is as great as it gets for me in my career right now, right? Super excited with what the opportunity is. None of this actually feels like work for me, right? This is just like, I'm getting to wake up and every day I'm trying to figure out how is it I'm contributing to humanity and the planet and all this stuff and getting to think outside the box and use all my skills that we talked about along the way, so that hopefully I can make a difference, right?
This new company then is just getting started, and again, you're probably the lead investor. Are you raising cash for it?
Raising cash for it. We're out doing that. That's probably going to go pretty quick. On that side of things. And it's important to understand, like, the company's been in commercialization mode for 6 months. We're just repackaging it into a new company so that we can really figure out the market. So
I see.
Like we're ready to turn on the first major commercial machine. There's a pipeline of probably $5 to $10 billion of opportunity just sitting there already on that side of things. But we need to continue to heavily invest on the R&D side, bring in the right scientists, do the work that we need to, and be really smart about who we are, what we're going to be when we grow up, right? Versus what we're not going to be. And a lot of the internal conversation is, look, if you create this amazing, new material, right, that you can do, you redesign airplanes. You basically replace all carbon fiber. You can replace a lot of what you use for aluminum. You can, change the way that you're doing, even storage containers, railroad tiles, or everything across the board, right? Bridges. There's one thing for us to think that we're the ones that can build all this stuff, but the reality is there's tons of amazing, creative, ambitious people out there in the world. And what we're going to do best with is eventually getting to the point where we're enabling all those creative minds to use this whole new, brand new class of material and seeing what they can create with it, right? Because that's where you really get the true ingenuity of humanity working together to really better things all together, right?
Where did the passion for leaving the world a better place, when did that set in? Because you went from, I'm going to build a cannabis scientific technology company to, I want to make the world a better place before I go. How did that pivot?
Oh, it was always there.
It was always there. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But, for me now, especially with kids, like my 5-year-olds, I have to travel quite a bit in order to do the jobs that I'm doing. Right. But it's funny, like people come over and they'll ask him, what do you think about your dad having to travel a couple nights every week? And he goes, it's okay. He's trying to save the planet. Right?
I like that, man. I like that. Will we ever, not in our lifetimes, right, John? We're not in our lifetimes. We're not going to see a world that doesn't have gasoline powered engines, oil powered engines, are we? Surely not. Well, that's not going to happen that fast, is it? I don't know.
I would say it's probably unlikely. And the reason for it is there's a lot of people that look at something like this and they think instant change, right?
I don't think so.
Right. And part of it too is you got to recognize there are, global economies, countries, families, all these people that rely on existing economies today, right? And we need to create pathways for shifting things, right? But if all of a sudden you're like, hey, we're changing everything right now, right? All of a sudden it just creates wars, it creates famine, it creates hunger, it creates death, creates all these things if you go too fast, right?
Yep.
So yes, you absolutely have to go down the path of progressively, moving the world to a better place. But with that said, we also have to recognize that it takes time to shift things, right? And but also even to support it, like the internal infrastructure, right? A lot of people kind of miss, how the hell does this even scale, right? How would you scale something like this? Like, what does that even look like? How do we move from where we are today to this thing over here? It takes time to do it right, because if not, we're just going to implode, right?
Yep.
We're trying to avoid implosion, right? It's the ultimate goal, right? With what we want to do, be really smart about how we're building it, and make sure that as we do this, we don't create harm in the process, and we find ways to create winning situations so we can get people to move over, right? And the more we create situations, the better. Honestly, you'll probably laugh with the stuff I'm talking about. I'm purposely going to oil and gas guys, right? Looking for investment from them because I want to find wins for them in the way that the global economy changes.
The comparison I think about there is when Philip Morris finally realized, okay, cigarettes are not going to be our future because the world has decided they're killing people, and they just started investing in other things as fast as they could, right? They started buying up all kinds of other companies, investing in other things. That's what I predict. That's what will happen with the oil companies too. They'll just do the same thing. They're going to just
look at there's a significant amount of funds right now set aside, for example, with Middle East sovereign funds, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in green energy right now. Why? Because they know the future is not going to be in oil.
That's right.
They're trying to go. Look, I think there's this view of, save the world to save the world. I think my wife and I, this is going back to how we overlap. We actually think about saving the world through capitalism, right? Because you're not going to defeat the way that the economics rule the world and how the world moves. So why don't we use it as a tool, right, to really create change, but let's make it a winnable change for everybody, right? It can't be one or two people winning. You have to make sure that you're creating a situation in which there's a lot of winners around the globe.
That's right. If not, people end up dead.
They end up fighting. Look, everyone around the world needs to eat.
That's right. Yeah.
Everyone needs to eat. So we got to make sure everyone's eating.
You brought up a great point when you said, all the change and the technology to create a cleaner, safer world is wonderful. But if you don't do it the right way and you don't attack the economy problem along the way and make sure you have winners along the way, you're going to create a lot of starving, poor people, wars, family, all kinds of stuff.
Look, change. When you have change, it's really hard because you will create winners and losers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the goal is, how is it, if you're really smart about it up front, you can minimize the losses and increase the wins, right? And it's never going to be a perfect model, right?
Yep.
In equation, because you're also dealing with humans who may not choose to make change, right? Or do
humans hate change in general.
Humans hate change in general, but there's gonna be a lot of people get really excited about where the world's going and what that market is, and why everyone's really excited about this new green economy and how the world. I mean, you have multiple trillions of dollars that has to change the way it's being made right now, right?
And how about this? You haven't really touched on this. Well, kind of, but it's wonderful. I love how the U.S. decides. The United States is like, we're going to do this.
Right.
And I'm always thinking, well, that's cool, but are we going to make India do that? Are we going to make China do that? Are we going to, I'm like, what?
I mean, for me, you gotta understand, this is where I believe in capitalism, right? If you have something that is a logical, smart product, right? You will have everyone across the globe, even China. Look, Chinese are capitalists, right?
They are.
They're capitalists, right? They're set up as running a capitalistic type of society, but they make capitalistic decisions.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
In the end, everyone makes capitalistic decisions. If you present the right opportunity to them, 9 times out of 10 or 99 out of 100 times, they'll probably make the right decision in terms of what that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there is an aspect of things when you look at it, when you create change. I'm going to be very careful about how I talk about this one, right? Where you can create instability, right? And with instability equals power change. And so there has to be looked at, right? You're not going to take a brand new technology like this and immediately introduce it into certain countries where we have geopolitical struggles, right? You won't even be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain way to play on sides with the introduction of technology. That has to be recognized because, life is complex. We're not playing a perfect economy here.
I just had a visual of of a car salesman being followed home by horse and buggy manufacturers because they're pissed off and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing, man? You're trying to run our business."
Right.
Oh man, you are a passionate guy and a visionary, obviously, and a creative guy. And I admire your ability to grab a hold of something brand new that you don't know anything about it and just dive in like a pit bull and just figure it out and learn it and then go for it. I love that.
It's the only way I know how to approach things.
I love it, man. I love it. Congratulations. By the way, do you want to mention a website or a URL or anything on the new company with the
Virien's up? We haven't even launched the new one yet.
Okay.
It's coming soon. It's just so new, and we're targeting specific people that we want to go out to on that side of things. That one's gonna be called Symius. So I was when I created Ebu, it actually had no absolute meaning whatsoever. It was just like a .com that actually meant a specific thing, right? Or it didn't mean anything. So that's where that came from. But with Virien and Symius, I wanted them to represent something. And the reason I went it came up with the name Symius was I was really thinking the terms better together.
Oh,
right.
All right. Symius.
Right.
If investors are listening to this episode and they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to contact you right now?
You can probably just write me on LinkedIn. It's probably a great way to do that.
All right. Very good. Well, I guess when we launch, we can always have Scott put in any links by the time we launch if you want to add something in.
Yeah, we can probably just do that. I can probably send some links, but that might be just the easiest way for anyone to reach out at this point. Or Scott, I'll share like the new email us as well that people could reach out to for something like this.
John, congratulations, man, on a very fascinating and interesting career so far. Congrats. Thanks for being on the show and sharing
Absolutely.
your story. Yeah,
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it, man.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.